So this lesson is going to be going over 26.3 in your book. We are going to be graphing the cosine function. And you guys are going to notice a lot of similarities between sine and cosine. So I did cut some of the examples just to keep this a little shorter for you guys and more concise. But if you're feeling at the end of this like you need more practice and you want me to make videos for the things I cut, just shoot me an email and I'd be happy to make more videos for you guys. So today what we're going to try to do is graph the cosine function in the form y equals a cosine of b of x. We're going to find the period, midline, and amplitude for the cosine function. So cosine is another periodic function, meaning it repeats after a given period of time. And these values are repeating every 2 pi. So very similar to sine function. All right, we're looking at the unit circle. And we're graphing the x values. So all those x's on the unit circle. So when we do these, again, I like to just pick out kind of my key points and just graph those. So I use my quadrantal angles, my 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And then I look at the x value. So the cosine, the x value is 1 at 0, 0 at pi over 2, negative 1 at pi, 0 at 3 pi over 2, and then back to 1 at 2 pi. So this is the parent function for cosine. These are the quadrantal angles, and these are really what I would focus on graphing. Right, so we've got, now it's starting up at the amplitude instead of at midline. Then it goes midline, down, midline, up. So very similar to sine, it's just literally one shift away. The period is always 2 pi, because that's the full unit circle. It starts repeating after that. Amplitude is always 1. That's the highest and lowest it gets. And that midline starts at y equals 0. Cosine is an even function because it's symmetric across the y-axis. So the cosine of x is equal to the cosine of negative x. So if I had the cosine of x is 0.5, the cosine of negative x would also be 0.5. So slightly different than sine. Again, not really a key idea here. This period, midline, amplitude, parent graph, key points. That's the big idea. This is kind of more just a side note. So I want you guys to pause the video here, try to check your understanding, and then I'm just going to go through it here instead of having you guys type it on a slide and then advance to the next slide. Alright, so hopefully you guys had a chance to try these. Number 1, the period, midline, and amplitude I put right in the notes for you guys, so that was just kind of a, hey, making sure you were following along, you wrote that down somewhere. What's the maximum value cosine can be? Well, the maximum, the highest it ever gets is 1. Right, and it's hitting those values at 0 and 2 pi. That is number 2. What's the minimum value? The minimum it ever gets is negative 1, and it hits that at pi. So similarities and differences between sine and cosine. Sine and cosine both have the same maximum and minimums, 1 or negative 1. The only difference is where they're hitting them. Sine would hit 0 at 0, So sine's starting off here, right, and then it's hitting its maximum at pi over 2. And then it's going back to midline at pi. It's hitting its minimum at 3 pi over 2. Then it's back to the midline at 2 pi. So sine is just looking at that one shift away. Right, so that, again, that's the only really difference between those. So if you have any further questions on that, please let me know. And we will kind of go from there.